Sam Kolder is really well known for his amazing video editing and cool transitions, but perhaps no transition is more unique than his drawing transition. Today I'll be showing you how to recreate this effect in Hitfilm Express. Today's video tutorial will be rated 4 stars out of 5 on the difficulty scale, as it's quite a complicated effect and we'll be going through some stuff pretty fast. Also, before we start this video, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more Hitfilm and video editing tutorials like this one, and follow me on Twitter at shiny_films. The first step to this effect is of course finding the piece of footage that you're going to make the transition into. Here I'm using this hyperlapse with a velocity effect on it. This time remapping and the forward motion is really key to selling the effect as we push through into the transition. The next thing you're going to need to do is to put this clip into Hitfilm and choose a frame somewhere around the middle. This is a frame that we're going to draw. Once you've got that frame, head up to the options on the top right hand corner of the viewer and just hit export frame. Now we'll have one PNG image of that frame we chose from our video. I opened mine up in Photoshop and scaled it, and then put my piece of paper over my monitor and then drew over it. Ideally, you should print it out and use something like carbon paper to trace it, but I didn't really have that on me at the moment, so I used the monitor. I just did some light tracing to get the basic effects, and then I just filled in some of the details later. As you can see on the actual drawing, it's actually not very detailed at all. I just scribbled some things in to make it look like a general outline. It doesn't have to be super accurate, as we'll show you later in this video. Then of course you're going to have to get that piece of paper and film a video of it. You can do a small push in if you want, or we can do it in post, or we can do it in both. Once you've done all of those steps, come back into Hitfilm and then make sure you've imported your original clip, your piece of paper clip, and that frame as well. The first step is to create a composite shot out of that original clip. So just right click on it and hit make composite shot. As you can see here, the duration is 23 frames. That's the number of frames of this clip, but we're just going to increase it to 3 seconds, like so. Hit enter and we'll have our new comp. Just drag the clip all the way to the very end because we're going to have this clip at the beginning, so just drag it in. You can drag it above or below, it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to position it in so it's in focus like so, and I'm just going to cut it over here where the clip needs to stop. This clip also has audio on it, so I'm really quickly just going to go and mute that. So far all we have is this. It's a not so super convincing transition. The first thing we're going to do to create our transition is to track the movement of this clip here. If you shot yours locked down on a tripod, then you won't even need to do this. To start tracking, open up the layer and then hit the plus icon next to tracks. We'll move over into the layer over here instead of the viewer. The viewer is where we viewed the whole comp, but the layer is where we just view the selected layer in its original form. We're also opening up this tracker, selecting this tracker here, and we've moved over into the track panel down here. As you can see, there are 2 points. I'm going to scroll to zoom in. You see the red box is the feature that we want to track, and the green box is the search area. I'm going to drag the red box to some point, say down here. And the green box is going to be pretty small. If you've got a lot of movement in your clip, you can make the green box really big. If you don't have much movement, you can make it small, because that's where it's going to search for the red feature in every frame. Actually, I've made a mistake here. I'm all the way in the middle of the clip, so I'm just going to move to the beginning and I'm just going to reposition this. Now let's move over into the track panel. In type, change from single point to double points. As you can see, this will change it from position only to position, scale, and rotation. Another point appears, so just drag it and move it onto another point. Make sure they're sufficiently apart enough to create some good distance. The computer uses the difference between the 2 points as positions to determine the scale and rotation values. Leave the method on optical flow, and in the track controls just hit the play button until the 2 points are tracked to the end. I'll be with you when we're done. The track is complete and the points have been tracked pretty well onto the piece of paper. Now we're going to move over into step 2, which is apply to layer. The first thing we're going to do is get a new layer to apply it to. hit new layer and then point, creating a new point layer. It's basically just a layer that holds transform values. Go back to the tracker and then leave the purpose as transform, select the layer to be the new point, and hit rotation and scale since we used 2 points. Then hit apply. Now go back to the viewer and select the new point. You'll notice it's in the position of the first point and it's tracked to its position. If we open it up, we can also see that it has scale and rotation values as well. Before we apply any of the cool effects, I'm quickly just going to go and recolor this clip because it's a bit dark and it's hard to see the lines. So I'm just going to quickly recolor it and then I'll be back with you in a second. Now we're going to go and apply the coloring in effect as the clip slowly starts to fade into this piece of paper. To do this, we're not going to duplicate the clip or anything. Instead, we're going to go back to the media panel and grab that frame that we actually drew. Under layer properties, select the blend mode to be multiply. And that way it'll kind of appear over the piece of paper, but we can still see the lines coming through. Now search for the quad warp effect. Just drag it on, and we'll notice that once we do, we'll have 4 corners to mess around with. Use these 4 corners to drag and warp our video onto the layer. Just drag each corner to the corresponding corner on the piece of paper, and then you can fine tune it later if you want as well. As you can see when we zoom in, this is meant to be the edge of this tower here, but it's really over here. So we're just going to make some adjustments to get everything looking a little bit more in line. Now my clip looks kind of in place and it's lining up a little better. The next step is to make sure that this sticks on the actual piece of paper. As you'll notice as we scrub through, it's just a flat image that doesn't move with the piece of paper. So to do that, just hit on this none text here and select the new point. This is called parenting. Now, this frame.png layer will move wherever the new point layer moves, and it'll pretty much copy all of these transform values. If we scrub through, you'll notice that now it sticks onto the piece of paper, like magic. I'm also just going to make sure to cut the frame.png layer short right here, so that it doesn't continue over onto this bit. The next step is to make this slowly color in, to make it slowly fade through. To do that, we're going to search up for the luminance key effect. So just search up for it and drag it on after the quad warp. You'll notice that we're already starting to see some really cool effects. If we open up the luminance key, you'll notice that the key type is key out darker. This is what I want because in this clip, as you'll notice, most of the stuff is really dark and there's a couple of bright spots which would be nice to fade in into the light paper at the beginning. As you can see when I'm adjusting the threshold right now, we're adjusting how much is keyed out. As you'll be guessing, we're going to be keyframing this value. I'm going to go somewhere around the 1 second mark in this 3 second comp, and then set a keyframe for the threshold to be 1. Next, I'm going to go all the way to the end here, and set a keyframe for the threshold to be, let's say, something like this. The interpolation of these keyframes isn't quite how I want it though. I'm going to open up the luminance key, and under threshold you'll see both of these keyframes are constant. Open up the value graph like so, and switch these to manual Bezier so we can adjust them. I'm going to start it by starting off the luminance key pretty quickly, and then I'm going to go and do a kind of curve like this. I don't know if there's a name for this kind of curve, but this is what I want it to happen. I want it to quickly start coming in, and then start coming in very quickly again at the end. I'm going to go to before this happens and start a RAM preview to make sure everything's okay. Now we're finished with this comp. The reason for that is the next bunch of effects need us to have this in its own comp so that we can adjust them all together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the media panel and hit new comp shot. Then I'm going to choose all the same settings, duration of 3 seconds and the same template. I'm just going to hit OK, and now we're going to drag the time.mp4 comp, not the clip, the comp, in here. And you'll notice it plays back pretty much just the same. But now we have all of this stuff on one layer, which is going to be really useful for us when we're keyframing it. Around 10 to 15 seconds before the transition, I'm going to start a zoom in. Open up the clip, open up the transform, and hit a keyframe for the scale. Then go all the way to this frame over here and increase it to something like 125, or you can even do more if you want. Like before, I'm going to select these, go into the value graph and adjust the interpolation. But here I'm going to make it a smooth beginning and a harsh end. You can always RAM preview this if you want to have a full look at what you're doing. The zoom looks pretty great, but now on this keyframe, I'm going to reset the zoom all the way back to 100%. Now the two images more or less line up. It's not perfect, but it'll get the job done. If you want to, you can zoom in even more, or you can use something like Action Cam Lens Distort, which I'll show you now. What I noticed Sam Kolder did in his transition was he used a lens distortion to make this clip seem like it was further away. Because as you can see, this clip here pretty much fills the frame already. But in Sam Kolder's clip, his was a pretty small drawing on a pretty small notebook. So he used an Action Cam Lens Distort to make this smaller so that the two would kind of blend into each other nicer. I'm going to show you how he did that. Just go into the Action Cam Lens Distort, go into the effects panel and search out for Action Cam Lens Distort, more like it, and just drag that onto your effects. I'm going to open up the effect over here, and you'll notice if we increase the field of view, it actually becomes bigger, which is not what we want. So reverse it, and then what you can do is one of two things. You can either set the scale anchor to be height, and that'll kind of push the middle in, but push the corners outwards. This doesn't look very good because the outsides are being stretched outwards and scaled up, which is kind of not what we want. We want the whole thing to be pushed inwards. So I'm just going to reset the scale anchor to be corner, and then in the wrap, just make sure you hit reflect. Now when we increase it, you'll notice everything becomes really small, and in the bits where it would normally be transparent, it's kind of mirrored the video. But it doesn't actually look that bad. Here's what you need to do to use this effect in this transition. At this frame, before the actual transition, make sure to set a keyframe for the field of view. Then, in the next frame, you can adjust the field of view to make it as small as you like. As you'll notice in this frame, I'm kind of lining everything up so that it's all in the same position, as much as I possibly can. And then a couple of frames down the line, just reset the field of view. Now you can open up the effect and just smooth out all of these keyframes. If you ask me, that's a pretty seamless transition. We don't need to have any fancy dissolves or anything like that. The clip kind of just comes into itself, which is really cool. In my opinion, that's already a really sweet transition. It looks really cool and it's really seamless. But in Sam Kolder's video, he added a flash in the middle just to kind of spice things up. So we're going to do the same. We're going to add a new gray layer. And really simply, we're just going to add the brightness and contrast effect and keyframe that to make it brighter and more contrasty in the middle. This should be pretty self-explanatory with all the stuff we've done, so I'll get back to you when we're done. We can also add a zoom blur effect and keyframe it in a similar way. Just make sure it's pretty subtle because you don't want to make it too strong. And with all of those additional effects done, we have our final effect. Thanks for watching this video. If you did find it useful, then be sure to leave a like on this video, and of course subscribe to my channel if you want more Hitfilm editing and video editing tutorials like this one. Also be sure to follow me on Twitter at shiny_films if you want more constant updates than I can give on YouTube. I will see you later. Stay shiny.